Hello, everyone. Oh my gosh, it feels like forever since we've done these. Usually it's the second Monday of every month, but in October, it was the first Monday, and there were 5 Mondays. So it's been about 6 weeks since we've met. So it feels like it's been a while, but welcome, welcome, welcome. If you are brand new, and extra welcome to you. This is our Moving with MS virtual support group. And this means a lot to me because I started when I was an MS specialist educating in-person MS support groups in my local area. And I was always just so fascinated and astounded at how many people didn't know MS specific physical therapy, exercises and tools and strategies. And so it's my honor to be able to bring those to you and to try to help as many people as possible worldwide. I think most people on here are in the United States, but welcome. Today, our topic is how to modify an exercise, and whether it's a single exercise or an exercise routine. If you don't know who I am, welcome. I'm Dr. Gretchen. I'm a physical therapist and multiple sclerosis certified specialist in the Buffalo, New York area. And I partner with MS Views and News to bring you guys these Moving with MS virtual support groups once per month. And we have a different topic every single month. And our supporter that we currently have is Viatris. All right, so again, welcome to our Moving with MS virtual support group, and a huge, huge thank you to Viatris, our supporter for this evening. Okay, so these are the big topics that we're going to discuss today. Number one, why modify? Number two, how to know when to modify. And then three, ways to modify. So we're going to be doing some demonstration in there as well. But first and foremost, it's important to understand the why, the when, and the how. So that's what we're going to be reviewing. Okay, so why modify? And this is an opportunity where you can also participate in that chat box that we have going. What are some reasons that you personally might modify? These are 4 of the top reasons that I always educate on, but there's plenty more. So why might you want to modify? First and foremost, if the exercises are too hard. Secondly, if the exercises that you're currently doing are taking up too much energy. Third, if you don't like your exercise routine. Fourth, if your exercises are making your symptoms worse. But ultimately, if your exercise routine is making you feel discouraged or defeated, that's not good. And if you're not consistent with your exercise routine, that's not going to be good either. These are all examples of when you'd want to modify. And I think it's important to understand that modification does not mean less than. It just means finding a plan that works for you. Because at the end of the day, if your exercises are too hard, I know for me personally, if my exercises are too hard and I don't know how to modify or don't know what to modify, I'm just not going to exercise. Or if my exercise just takes up too much energy, I might assume that all exercise takes up too much energy. So I'm just not going to exercise. So everything on this list here is something that can cause you to not exercise if you don't have a modification or don't know how to modify. But again, at the end of the day, if anything is preventing you from staying consistent, and if it doesn't feel good, then we need to modify. I see in the comments if it's uncomfortable or painful. Yeah, absolutely. No exercise should ever be painful. There's certain situations where it's okay if exercise is a little bit uncomfortable, in the sense that you're using muscles you haven't used in a while, if you're strengthening, or maybe you're stretching muscles you haven't stretched in a while. A little bit of discomfort is okay, but pain is never okay. And so if your exercises are causing pain, you're not going to exercise and you shouldn't exercise, but we can modify to reduce that. Balance issues, absolutely. Regular physio makes my symptoms worse. Yes, I used to hear that all the time before my patients started doing work with me. MS-specific exercise meets my needs. Yep, on bad days, I can modify as needed. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so how to know when to modify. And this is a question I have for you that I'd love for you to put in the chat, because everyone is so different, and this will give me a good idea on where I need to focus or if I need to dive deep into both. So when you feel fatigued when you're exercising, do you personally feel fatigued or worse symptoms or pain or any of these things that I mentioned on the previous slide during your routine or after your routine? And by routine, I just mean the exercises that you're doing. Doesn't matter how long your exercises are, whether your exercises take up an hour or 5 minutes. Do you feel the thing that isn't great, the unbalance, the pain, the if symptoms worsen, the fatigue? Do you feel that during your exercises or after? Because there are different approaches to modifying based on your answer to this. So I see Wendell says after, Raquel says after, Lori says fatigue can kick in during and after. That's true. Both is absolutely an answer. Cindy says after. Debbie says both. Yep, both can definitely qualify. Depends, walking it's during, other exercises it's after. Okay. I feel the fatigue during. Rod and Melissa say after. Gwen says if during, then I stop. Okay, so about half and half, maybe a little bit more for after, but definitely a good amount saying during too. It depends. If it's during, I may do fewer sets. Good. My Aquafit affected me last week. Lower back, hip pain for 3 days. Yeah. Fatigue usually after. Okay. I feel fatigue during, but will feel better once I rest. Good. Walking mostly. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'll go into both. I was going to go into both anyways, but now I know how in depth to go for each of these, just to make sure you feel like you have some answers. So for anyone who said during or both, if you ever feel symptoms worsening, like a few of you guys mentioned fatigue, during your exercise, and this could be during walking, it could be during your exercise routine where you're sitting down and now is your time to exercise. It could be any time before you say, okay, I'm done with my exercise for today. If you're feeling any negative things happening during, then the trick is that you need to modify during your routine using the techniques that we're about to discuss. So I'm about to list a ton of different ways that you can modify. And if you feel fatigued during the exercise, then you actually have a nice benefit above everyone who, including myself, feels the fatigue or worsened symptoms after. Because if your body is telling you in the moment, this is too much for me, or this isn't comfortable, it's almost like it's waving, I wouldn't say a red flag, but maybe a yellow or an orange flag, then you can make a change in that moment. With multiple sclerosis, well, regardless of what you've heard from other potential physical therapists you may have worked with, personal trainers, etc., with multiple sclerosis, you should not push into fatigue. You should not push into pain. You shouldn't even be feeling pain initially. You shouldn't be pushing yourself. That will do zero good. And I know that I think a lot of us, when we grow up, we're taught no pain, no gain, go big or go home. And that couldn't be furthest from the truth when we have MS. So if you are someone who answered that you feel worse or fatigue or whatever it is during, use that to your advantage and stop, slow down, rest, use the things that we're about to talk about. If you are fatigued or your symptoms worsen or whatever negative thing is happening afterwards, this does get a little bit trickier, but basically you're going to take all these things that we're about to talk about on the next several slides, and you're going to proactively modify. And the tricky part about this is that you're going to modify even if you feel fine during your exercise. And what I didn't ask you yet, but if you want, you can put it in the chat, is for those of you that said after, like you feel fine during your exercise, but after is when you feel super fatigued, or after is when you feel your numbness or weakness or pain or XYZ, then likely during your exercise routine, you did feel fine. It wasn't affecting you during, but it did affect you after. So we need to take that into consideration and implement one thing or a few things to modify, even when you don't feel like you need to modify. Okay, so we'll come back to this at the end, but for everyone who's said that you feel worse after, that's so important. I cannot stress that enough. You need to do these modifications even when you feel like you don't need to. Okay. I have to modify due to a bad knee. Yep, numbness during. I feel better when exercising. Awesome, Julie, that's great. Stop, rest, stretch. Good. Okay. So now we're going to get into ways to modify, and there's lots of ways. So these are just some positions, and then I'll demonstrate after this. So one way that you can modify an exercise is to change the position that you're doing it in. And this would be specific to you if you feel like any exercise is too challenging for you, or it's too fatiguing, or maybe it causes you to be too off balance. If anything is too challenging about it, then change the position. Position is usually one of the first ways that I modify with all of my clients. So I'm going to demonstrate an exercise in all of these positions for you so that you can clearly see exactly what I'm referring to. So standing, sitting up tall, recline sitting, hook lying with feet up, quadruped, lying on your side, lying on your back, lying on your stomach. So if you want, you can write those down. You guys will get the recording of this as well, but I'm about to demonstrate this for you with the marching exercise. So when it comes to improving our functional movements for day-to-day activities like walking, stair climbing, getting in and out of the bed, in and out of car, in and out of a shower, anytime we have to step over something, up on a curb, we need to use our hip flexor strength, as well as lots of other things. But for our sake right now, let's go with hip flexor strength. So we need to be able to use our hip flexors. One of my favorite exercises, and if you're a client of mine, you know this, one of my favorite exercises for hip flexor strength is marching. And I'm about to demonstrate that for you. But it's important to know how to modify, because if you don't have success with the marching exercise, and that might just mean it feels too challenging, it's too fatiguing, it's not going well, and maybe even you have zero movement, which is very common. If you have MS and you have one leg that's weaker than the other, you might be able to march with one leg, but the other leg does absolutely nothing. Or it lifts, but just a little bit, a fraction of what the other side lifts. So what do you do in that case? First of all, it's important that you still do the exercise. I can't stress that enough. Even if you have zero movement or a fraction, like literally a centimeter of movement, that is not an excuse to not do the exercise. The only way to get that muscle stronger is by activating that muscle, or at the very least, activating that neural pathway. And we talk a lot in lots of areas about neuroplasticity. That's that. But that's not the point for today. So today we're talking about modification. So I'm going to demonstrate a modification for lots of different positions for the marching exercise. And what I want you to take away from this is not only the position changes, but also that all of these exercises strengthen my hip flexors. They're going to look different because for some I'll be standing, for some I'll be sitting or lying down, but they all strengthen my hip flexors. And when it comes to MS, the most important thing is that you're choosing the variation, you're choosing the option that feels easiest to you and that you are most successful with. Because if it feels easiest, you'll be able to do more repetitions with good quality. And the more repetitions you do with good quality, the more opportunities you're giving your brain and therefore neuroplasticity to strengthen those neural pathways, which will then strengthen the muscles. So there's no shame in picking the easiest one. You shouldn't ever pick the hardest one, but let's get into it. So I'm going to move my chair out of the way so I have lots of space here to show you. Okay, I'm not going to use a mobility aid right now just because I'm going to be in the middle of the room and moving around, but you absolutely can use a mobility aid for any of these. So the first one is standing. So when you're doing standing marching, you're standing again, you can use a mobility aid. It could be a rollator, which is why I have two hands in front of me. It can be a cane, it could be trekking poles, it can be whatever you want. But you can use a mobility aid. But what your legs are doing is marching. So this is a standing march. And down, up, and down. Now, the slower you go, the more this is going to be challenging for balance versus hip flexor strength. So again, holding on to something if you need to. Now, I'm really exaggerating right now so you can tell what the movement is, but just so you know, this is also marching. This is the same exercise. This too is the same exercise. If that's all you can do, great. You're still marching. You're still activating your hip flexors. So that's the standing way to march and use your hip flexors. Seated is another option. So you can practice the marching exercise sitting up tall in any chair. It could be your kitchen chair, an office chair, a sofa or couch chair, your toilet, wherever. But sitting up tall, you can hold on to something if you need to, engage your belly muscles, and march from here. This is the same exercise that I was doing standing, but now I'm sitting. So this would be a seated march. Now, this is pretty challenging, and to be honest, for most people, this variation is the hardest. It's harder than standing typically because your hips are already bent at 90 degrees or so, and then you're bending your hip even further. Whereas when you're standing, your hips are straight and you're bending from there. So if this is too challenging, modify. You could modify by doing the standing option, or the next is seated reclined. So reclining back opens up the space in your hip more, and it's the same exercise from here, but this will likely be a little bit easier. So you're sitting and recline. This is how you would do this exercise. Another option, so this is where we kind of get down to the floor. I'm going to do these on the floor. If you cannot safely stand up from the floor or confidently stand up from the floor, do not do these on the floor. You could do them on a bed or on a couch for the most part. So another option could be in what we call this hook lying position. So you're on your back, your knees are bent, feet are flat on the floor. Arms can be wherever it's comfortable for you. Engage your belly muscles and march. This is the same movement that I was doing, sitting and standing. I'm still marching with my hips. I'm bringing my knee up closer towards my face. So this is another option. Another version, we can do this side lying. So you can roll onto your side. I like to prop my head up. You can keep it down. That part is really up to you. But once you're here, there's two different ways that you can do this. Option number one is to march just your top leg and down. March and down. Option number two is to march both legs. So this hand up here can help you stay stable. You bring them up and down, up and down. But as always, you'd want to do both sides, because if I just do my top leg, then I need to switch sides to do my other top leg. Or even if I'm doing both sides, the bottom leg is doing most of the work. And so it would only be fair for me to switch sides and do whichever one I did whether it was both legs or this one. So that would be the sideline version. You could do the hook line. So that was this one, but with your feet up. So you can put your feet on your couch, on a chair, on something for support and march from here. So this would be another option. There's two more options. These final two options for this specific exercise, you're not going to see a whole lot, and they're usually not my go-to options, but they are still options and would be good for other exercises. So I'm still going to show you them. One is quadruped. So that means I am on my hands and knees. My hands are underneath my shoulders. My knees are underneath my hips, and I would march from here. So again, this is very unlikely, but it would look like this, march. I'm still bringing my knee up towards my face. It's the same exercise, just in this quadruped position. And one thing that I do want to point out about this version is that while it looks odd and it's not the easiest, it is the most functional for anyone looking to improve their strength with standing up from the floor. Because one way, there's many ways, but one way to stand up from the floor is to bring one leg forward, and then you'd come here, and then you'd stand up from there. But what was that first step? We first had to bring our leg forward. That's this exact movement. And so while it is an odd one, it is a functional exercise. And then the last one, you're not going to be able to see a whole lot, but again, I do want to demonstrate. Let me turn around this way. So you're lying on your stomach, and you're going to bend one leg, and you're going to push that knee down into the ground. So you're not going to see anything because the ground's not going to move, but you push down and relax, and push and relax. So I'm still using my hip flexors. I still feel this right in here, but I'm pushing down. It's an isometric version of the exercise. And then, of course, you do the same thing on the other side. So lots of positions that you can modify in. And again, all of those was one exercise, just in all those different positions. All of those were marching. And so the trick is to find the one that works best for you. Let me get back up closer to you guys. So we could break down any exercise like that. Maybe we want to strengthen your hamstrings, or maybe we want to strengthen your ankle muscles, your core. Any exercise can be broken down by position. So that's one way that you can modify. Okay, so let me see if there's any questions before I go back in. Merle says, I try to use my stationary bike, but the fatigue I get keeps me from doing it very often. I want to improve my cardiovascular health. Are there modified exercises we can do to increase our heart rate? Absolutely. I'm going to write that down so we can come back to that, because I'm going to go into many more modifications. We just touched on one type, which was positions. So I'm going to write that down so I remember to answer that at the end. So modifications for aerobic. Yeah, one reason that might be really fatiguing for you is because you're getting your aerobic exercise, your cardiovascular exercise, through leg movements versus upper body. So there's that. I'll touch on that. Okay, so we did the positions. So another way that you can modify is speed. So speed is a way, well, how do I want to phrase this? Speed is a type of exercise, and we can use it as a modification or as its own form of exercise. For what I mean by that is, if you're someone who is doing strengthening-based exercises, then, and if you've ever said, I don't know why I'm not walking faster, I'm getting stronger, It's because you're not doing speed-based exercises. So incorporating speed in general, even if you're not using it to modify, is going to be an important form of exercise for you if you have goals of improving your speed. But regardless, speed is a way that we can modify. Usually, going slower is going to be more challenging. Going faster is going to be easier. And the reason for that is because if you're going slow, then it takes more time. It takes more endurance, more stamina of those muscles. If you even think of like a bicep curl. If I have a weight all the way down in my hand and I'm slowly trying to lift that up, I have to use my muscle for however many seconds that took. Maybe that was 10 seconds, I don't know. And then if I slowly lower, that's another 10 seconds. That's a lot of weight to move slowly. Versus if I just went like that, I only use my muscle for maybe 1 second, maybe 2 seconds max. So typically, slower is harder, faster is easier. So if you're looking to modify an exercise, moving faster, as long as you have good quality, might be a good option for you. But if you are looking to increase the intensity, so you're modifying via advancing, then slower would be better. Also, Tom is saying research, or it might be Linda, research a TheraCycle to improve cardio. Awesome. Okay, so speed. So we got positions and speed as two different ways to modify. Movement. So more movement typically is harder than less movement. So what we want to think of here, even if we think of me demonstrating those marching exercises, moving more, so really lifting my leg as high as I could, how I was initially demonstrating in that standing position, is harder. I need to use more muscle to lift my leg higher. Versus if I'm doing less movement, then I don't have to lift as high. That's going to be easier. And so allowing yourself to not lift as high, giving yourself that permission that you don't have to lift as high as you can. All you might be going for today is just to activate that muscle in some way, shape, or form, even if that means lifting it 1 centimeter or 1 inch. So less movement is going to be easier. So pausing is another way to modify. So a longer pause, or therefore a longer hold, is harder because pausing or holding while in the exercise requires more stamina. It's very similar to if you're moving slower, whereas shorter pauses or no hold is going to be easier. And I'll do an example, a demonstration of this in a bit too. So longer pause in the exercise is harder, shorter pause is easier. So again, we've got positions. Let's go back here. We've got positions that we can modify. We can modify via speed. We can modify via the amount of movement we're going for. We can modify via the amount of time we are pausing or not pausing. We can reduce our exercise time. And the way that we do time, so I want you to think of exercise time as from if you were to press a stopwatch, like go, now is when I'm starting my exercises. And I want to exercise for 20 minutes or so. But that those 20 minutes is what caused you to feel worse after or during, then you can reduce the exercise time. Instead of 20 minutes, then maybe you're only going to shoot for 15 minutes. And ways that you can reduce your exercise time are by doing fewer exercises. So if you initially did 5 exercises, then maybe you do 4 next time. Or fewer repetitions. So maybe you still do 5 exercises, but instead of doing 10 repetitions within each set, you'll do 7. Or fewer sets. So still 5 exercises, still 10 repetitions, but instead of 3 sets, you'll just do 2. So lots of different ways that you can work with reducing the exercise time, the literal amount of time that you're exercising for. Another option is to increase your exercise time. So this is directly opposite of what we just mentioned. And to increase your exercise time, you basically would just take more rest breaks. So you still do the same plan. It's still the 5 exercises for the 10 rounds for the 3 sets, but you are taking more rest breaks. So it's going to, instead of taking you 20 minutes, it might take you 25 minutes or 30 minutes. And not only that, maybe you're taking more rest breaks and you're doing a different position, or you're taking more rest breaks and you are reducing the amount of pause to make it a little bit less intense for you. So you can combine some of these as well. It doesn't just have to be one or the other. So which to do? There's lots of different ways. I think we just reviewed 6 or 7 different ways to modify. And so which ones should you do? The way that I suggest doing this is to try just one exercise at first and see if it helps. Or sorry, not one exercise, one modification. So try just one of those. Maybe you choose to do fewer repetitions, or fewer exercises, or you don't add a pause, or you're not lifting as high. It can be any of them, but just pick one, whichever one fancies you the most, whichever one feels like you're most excited to try, or whichever one feels like that's the one that you think would make a difference for you. Try it and then see if it helps. If it doesn't, then try 2 next time you exercise, and so on. And this is where it gets really tricky because, as I mentioned in the beginning, I'm going to go back to those people who said that you don't notice that your symptoms are worse until after you exercise. You're not going to want to feel like doing less exercises because you feel fine during your exercise. You're probably not going to want to feel like moving faster to make it easier or not adding a pause, because if you don't feel like you need to modify, it's harder to make yourself modify, but you have to try it out. And you then have to analyze afterwards, how did that make me feel? Were my symptoms any different? Did it help? If so, did it help a lot or barely or somewhere in the middle at all? And so you're taking these notes, you're constantly reevaluating. It's a lot of trial and error. For some people, you get it on the first go. For other people, it might take a week or even a month or 2 or 3 months before you really figure out what your body likes best. And so it takes just picking one form of modification and then analyze, how did that go? If that didn't go according to plan, if you still felt fatigue afterwards or the symptom that worsened, next time try 2 things. Maybe you reduce the number of exercises and you move faster. How did that go? Still not good? Okay, let's try reducing the number of exercises, moving faster, and not adding a pause, or changing the position. How did that go? So there's no right or wrong. It truly is trial and error, which is great because you can pick the ones that feel best and most doable for you. Another option, or not option, another thing that you absolutely should do is listen to your body. This is trickiest for those of us that don't notice worsened symptoms or negative side effects of exercise until after, because if we're listening to our body during our exercise, our body might be saying, yay, this is great, we like this, you're doing awesome, keep going, push yourself to the max. But then our bodies afterwards are saying, whoa, too much, now I can't move for a day or 2. And so you need to listen to your body in both situations, during your exercises, but also after. How did that feel? And analyze based on that. And then lastly, I like to have 2 to 3 plans or routines, because one thing that you might be thinking in the back of your mind right now is, MS is so different every single day, or exercise affects me differently every time I exercise. So how is this even going to make sense? So the way that we make sense of that is, you could, for 1 full week, just try the one modification change and see if that helps. Because if it did help, you may have just exercised with that modification on a day that was better for you. Or if it didn't help, you may have just chosen a day to change that modification when it was a fatigue day anyways. And so because MS is so fluctuating, we do need to give it time for these to see how they're going to affect us. So that might mean that for a full week, we just change the one modification each time we exercise. So let's just go with, we change the position for the movements that are hardest for us for a full week. Then analyze at the end of that week, okay, how did I feel consistently? Did that change anything for me? If yes, great. That's all you need to do. Let's stick with that one modification. If not, then try 2 or 3 and so on. But you can have 2 to 3 different plans so that if you guys know your body best. If you know today is a high fatigue day for me, you should not be doing the same exercise routine that you do on a high energy day. They should be drastically different. When I work with my clients one-on-one, we have at least 2 different routines usually. One for a day where it might be their regular day or a good day, nothing's really getting them down that day, but then a different routine for when they're having a high fatigue day or a worse day, whatever that means for them. And sometimes the worst day exercise routine, everything that they can do, or every exercise is something they can do in their bed, or from a couch, or in a specific location that you can easily access. Because if you only have one routine and you're having a day where you can't do that routine, likely you're not going to exercise at all. And the whole point is to have a modified version so that you can exercise. You do have something that fits your needs that day. So I would highly encourage you to make lists of at least 2 different routines, if not 3. And the way that you would do that is simply by choosing, okay, which of my exercises are the most challenging for me? Which is the most easiest for me? Which is somewhere in the middle? And form them around that. So obviously on your highest fatigue days, you would choose the easier ones, or the ones that you could do from a seated reclined position and modify with everything that we talked about so far. I see Raquel says, can you switch between modifications? If I get tired standing and decide to lay down instead, is that okay? Absolutely. Yeah, if let's say you're shooting for 10 good quality repetitions of marching, you could do 5 standing and then 5 seated reclined, or 5 sitting reclined, then 5 lying down. Yeah, you don't have to finish a set or finish an exercise in one position just because you started it that way. You absolutely can switch. Similarly, if you started off with the big movement, you're trying to lift as high as you can, that's going to be harder. Maybe you could do 4 successfully like that. Then maybe you do 3, that's maybe mid movement. And then maybe you do the last several just low movement. So that's absolutely fine too. Good question. Do the hip flexor exercises you demonstrated earlier help for going upstairs? Yes, because picture yourself going upstairs, or even picture me, since you were watching me earlier, picture me going upstairs. One movement that I have to do is lift my leg in the same way that I was marching in order to put it on the next step. So yeah, absolutely. I do want to do a little bit further of a demonstration to demonstrate some of those other modifications, but this was the final slide. So as always, if you want to reach out to me or see the services that I offer, find other free resources. I forgot to put my book on here. There's just too many places to mention now, but these are all of the places that you can find me. Excuse me. And again, a big thank you to MS Visa News and Viatris for being our supporter. Before I demonstrate, let me answer that question that came in earlier. And if you guys have further questions, then please let me know. So the question was how to modify for aerobic exercise. So one thing I mentioned earlier, one reason that you might be feeling challenged with aerobic exercise is because you're using your legs. Potentially, this might not be true for everyone, but using your legs to get yourself aerobic exercise, which is what we commonly do, whether we're using a bike, walking, a treadmill, elliptical, those are all leg-based exercises. and we use them to strengthen our heart, to get our cardiovascular health. But it is fatiguing. We have to use a lot of muscles to get that to work. So I like to do cardiovascular and aerobic exercises with my upper body. They have, there's something called an under the desk bike, I think is what it's called. And you put your feet on it, and it's literally just like a pedaler, it might be called. Anyways, you can put, if you put it on a desk, you can use it on your arm. So you hold your hands here and you bike like this. And you can go forward, you can go backwards, you can add resistance. So I really like to use that for aerobic exercise. And then your legs aren't fatigued. So then you can do strength training with your legs afterwards if you want to. So that the bike, the hand bike or pedalers, I forgot what they're called, but they sit under the desk where you can bring them over to your couch. They're portable. Those are something that you can use. Or what I commonly do for my clients, if I back up here, is I just use my upper body, like, let me get centered here. We'll do upper body exercises like this. So we'll just go swing, I call this arm swing. And maybe you go faster than what feels comfortable for you, and that gets your heart rate up. Or maybe you do more motion, and that's what gets your heart rate up. Or more power. Really punch, punch, punch with oomph behind every movement. So that would be a good one. Forward punches. If you've ever joined any of my live classes, or I even have some of my live classes that were recorded on and put on YouTube, if you go to my YouTube page, I start every class with these movements that we're doing right here for upper body cardio to get our brain primed for neuroplasticity. You can do jumping jacks. You could do punches, rolling punches. There's so many things that you can do, but I like to do those for cardiovascular health. There's other options too, but that's one way that you can modify. If you're adamant about using your legs, make sure resistance is fully off. So if your resistance is up, turn that down. Make it as easy as possible for you. Thank you so much for what you do for us. You're very welcome. Portable under desk exercise machine on Amazon. Awesome. Thank you, Terry. Or pedal exerciser. Yeah. Do you advise against using a treadmill? No, I don't advise against it. It depends why you're using it. I can give you examples of what I would use it for with my patients. So I probably wouldn't use a treadmill for cardio unless my patient has pretty good leg strength and endurance, and it wouldn't affect their leg strengthening exercises that they do afterwards. So if that's you, great. You could do the treadmill as your aerobic exercise, but otherwise, I like to use the treadmill for implementation reasons. So practicing, so really low speed, we're not using it for treadmill reasons where we're turning the speed up, but really low speed and really exaggerating the movement to practice really good form. So there are times and place for it. It just, I think they're often misused when you have MS because we just think, oh, let me get on the treadmill, but then you can't do any of your leg strengthening exercises after because you're too fatigued. So if that's the case, you'd want to modify that. And maybe you do still do the treadmill, but it's less time, or lower incline if you did have an incline on there, something like that. I do have an under the desk stepper, and that is a great idea for using it. Good. Thank you, Dr. Gretchen, for everything you have taught us. You're an awesome teacher. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. I appreciate you and that you've been so willing to share your knowledge with all of us. I've been following you for 3 years now and have improved because of the many things I have learned specifically from you. That's awesome. I've purchased your book, which is a great resource. I'm so glad to hear that. I'm turning my book into an audiobook, by the way. So it should be available in the beginning of January or so. So keep your eyes and ears open for that. Okay, you are amazing. Oh my gosh, you guys are so sweet. Thank you so much. Is strength or cardio aerobic more IMPT with MS important? Is that what that abbreviation is? Is strength or cardio? Well, if that is what that question is, if that means important. Okay, yes, that is what that means. Um, there is no, and actually in my book, there's a specific section that says, what is the best exercise for MS? Because I get that question all the time, or similar to this, like, what's more important for MS? And the answer that you're probably not going to like is, it depends on you. It depends on what your symptoms are. And not only that, more importantly, it depends on what your goals are. I'm just going to call out names here, but like if Debbie, if her strength is pretty good, but her flexibility is not great and her balance isn't great and cardio is not great, well, then strength for her isn't going to be as important. We would still work on it for sure, but it wouldn't be the priority because she has other things going on. Whereas if Gwen had really poor strength, her cardio might be okay. Strength training might be what we focus on. So there is no right or wrong answer. It truly does depend on what your symptoms are and what your goals are. And then thirdly, what your priorities are. Your priorities are more important than my priorities for you. So that's how you kind of got to think of that. Love you all the way from Canada. It's actually true for me. Nice, Debbie. I speed walk for cardio and get fatigued on my left leg around the 2-mile mark. Oh, I love this question. Okay, so I'm going to read this question again slower so you guys can hear the full thing. I speed walk for cardio and get fatigued on my left leg around the 2-mile mark. Should I start off jogging to maybe extend how much further I can go? So before we even get to strategies on seeing how far you can go, we would need to figure out why that fatigue is happening, fatigue on your left leg, why that's happening at the 2-mile mark. It could be that your core temperature is rising and therefore heat intolerance is kicking in. Even if you're someone who doesn't experience other forms of heat intolerance is when anything causes your core temperature to rise by at least half of a degree. And when that happens, any symptom can worsen. So I see this all the time with exercise, specifically walkers, joggers, runners. They can go a certain distance until a certain point, and then that's when foot drop kicks in, or that's when fatigue kicks in. And more times than not, it's due to one reason that it happens is because our core temperature is rising too much. So the strategy to go further distance might just be cooling your core temperature down, wearing a cooling vest, sipping ice cold water, tiny, tiny sips throughout that jog if you can. And you might notice that you can go further just simply for that reason alone. Now, the other reason that could be is maybe your muscles don't have the endurance. Maybe they don't have the speed. And so there's no right or wrong answer. I don't have enough information to help this specific question. Because yes, you could try jogging, but if you haven't been practicing speed, as we were talking about earlier, if you haven't been practicing speed, then you might actually not be able to go as far because you're working on speed. You're going to fatigue quicker potentially, so you wouldn't go as far. So many different situations, but first figuring out why is that happening? Is it heat intolerance, or is it truly just your endurance? And if it's the endurance, then usually what I like to do is still go for the walk, but if around 2-mile mark is where that fatigue kicks in, about 1.8 miles, stop and rest for even just 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever you need, just stop and rest, and then go further. Then your muscles should have had enough time to recover a bit. Then you might be able to go 2.5 miles or 2.2 miles. And so usually that's how I would try to go a little bit further distances, allow yourself a quick break, and your break could be standing. I don't know where you're going for walks, but it could be a standing break, or if there is a seated option, if there's a bench nearby, if you have a rollator, you could sit for your rest and then continue on. That's usually what I would do. Angela sent a sample peddler. Let me copy this link for you guys. I'm just going to copy this link that Angela sent over. Send to all. I'm still aiming for a 5K. We'll keep trying. Awesome. Yeah, definitely keep trying. There's lots of different strategies. I used to love hot yoga. Oof. Prior to MS, I have cold intolerance. Canadian after all. Nice. I'm very close to Canada, being in Buffalo. I'm scared to try hot yoga again. I've heard so much about heat intolerance with exercise. I use a clip-on fan with my treadmill to cool me down because of menopause. What are your thoughts? Not everyone gets heat intolerance. Yes, it's common. Cold intolerance is another thing, absolutely. But not everyone gets heat intolerance. If you've never felt heat intolerance, meaning you've never felt worsened symptoms from a hot shower, from the hot temperatures outside, from being super stressed, from exercise, if you never feel worsened symptoms from those things, you might just not have heat intolerance. Not everyone does. And so you might be totally fine with hot yoga. What I typically would recommend is before you commit to a hot yoga class, putting yourself in an environment that might be similar to that, like a warmer shower, and see how you respond being around heat. I love hot showers. See, like, does that affect you at all? Can you take a hot shower without it affecting you? That way, you'd get a better idea on how confident you are that it would or wouldn't affect you. But then if you do decide to go, you can go to the hot yoga class, bring that fan for sure, and also maybe be prepared to step out. Like maybe you can be in hot temperatures. Hot yoga classes, I've only attended one. I did not personally enjoy it, but it was like 45 minutes or an hour, maybe even longer. It was long. It felt long. So if that's the case, maybe be prepared at the 20-minute mark, step out, let your core temperature cool down, and then maybe step back in after 5 minutes or so. You might have to do something like that. I do hot yoga. Oh, so Melissa says, I do hot yoga and I love it. Awesome. The heat does not bother me. Perfect. If you take a hot shower to see if you can handle it, might be sure to have someone close by to help if you cannot move. Yeah, so if you do feel like, oh yeah, that might actually bother me, Angela's point is so true. Make sure someone's nearby to assist you if needed. Okay, I do just want to quickly demonstrate the last final things. You guys have had such amazing questions. What I wanted to demonstrate was the movement piece. So I demonstrated the different positions that you can exercise in, but I just wanted to take it a step further and demonstrate some of those other things. So, okay. Up here. Okay, so other ways that you can modify. So I demonstrated the different positions, but there's other ways that you can modify as well. So I just wanted to do a quick visual recap for you. So one would be less movement. So let's just stick with the marching exercise for now. The more I move, the harder it is. So if I'm trying to lift really high, that's going to be harder than if I'm just trying to lift here. So if you're trying to modify an exercise routine one way, don't move as much, don't lift as much. That is totally okay. It doesn't make the exercise any less than. Another option was speed. So oftentimes going slower is harder. If I try to really go slow, that is going to be so challenging, especially in standing, because now I'm standing on one leg for a longer amount of time as well. But even if I were sitting, it's still so much harder to go slow and down versus fast. Fast, you don't have to use the muscles for as long. So you could do fast and low. This is going to be so much easier than slow up and slow down. So you can change the speed based on what you're looking for. If you are looking to advance an exercise, slow it down. If you're looking to make it easier, go faster. And then the last thing I wanted to demonstrate was adding a pause or not. So an option to make an exercise harder would be to add a pause. So just get your leg up to wherever your goal is, pause, and lower. March, pause, lower. That's going to be harder than no pause or less of a pause. So if you're trying to modify an exercise, no pause, just up and down. Or instead of pausing for 1, 2, 3, You only pause for 1, 1. So there's a little bit of a pause or no pause. So those are some other strategies that you can use in any positions. I just chose standing for right now, but in any of those positions, you can choose to modify with any of those other techniques as well. So choose what feels right for you and your body. That's going to be the most important thing. Okay. Let me see if anything else came in, and then I'll let you guys go. They tell you in hot yoga not to go outside of class. Oh, or it ruins the benefits. They don't understand MS. Yeah. I love that sweatshirt. Thank you. My friend made it for me. She actually has her own online store on Etsy. For someone with MS, heat can affect you quickly without realizing it. Yeah, when you go to move, you cannot. Absolutely. All right, well, I don't see any other questions. Oh, one thing came in. Instead of just leg lifts, I do side kicks. Yeah, so side kicks, it's a different muscle group, so you're not strengthening your hip flexors, which is fine. Just in our examples tonight, we were doing hip flexor strengthening. Side kicks is a different muscle, but that's a good exercise too. There's lots of good exercises. All right, I will let you guys go. Do you have specific videos for in bed? You know, I have a video. I think it's in the missing link, I believe. Called, yeah, it's in my online program. It's called Exercises to Do in Bed, and it's a full 13-minute, I believe, 13-minute exercise class where I'm literally in my bed and I filmed a video of it. So if you're not in the missing link, though, you wouldn't have access to that. I will say, though, I've recorded a few shorter videos, like for Instagram or YouTube Shorts, where I'm in bed and demonstrating some exercises that you can do in bed. Some of them are upper body, like the ones that we were doing today, like our arms like this. You could even do some of the marches in bed reclined. You could do your ankle lifts, heel slides. So there's a decent amount in there. So I would probably, if you're not in the missing link, I would refer to one of those resources. Yes, I have heard of restorative yoga. Thank you again to MS Views and News and Viatris, our supporter, and to all of you guys. I love teaching you guys. And so thank you for showing up. Thank you for participating. And I will see you guys next month. Have a good rest of your night.